Well, let's get started since it's a little after 10. And I'd like to welcome, the ECB members as well as the ordinance members to attending today. And Sarah's going to handle what Doug would normally do if he was at here. I'd like to also recognize Kimberly. She's there, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. And I went and invited Kevin O'Vaney to come, and he's the watershed council manager, so he could have some input on what we're looking to strive on the pavers. And also Chris Jensen from the development office, who has been involved with them and will continue to be involved with them once we get something in the code. So I'd like to start out and ask you, Chris, if you would lead it off on what you can give us information on in regard to the pavers, and then I'll move on to Kevin, and then I'll go to the ECB to see what their thoughts are for the ordinance committee as we move forward with this proposal. So,
okay. So,
Chris, you set?
So pervious pavement, pervious pavers, stuff like that. Currently, our code reads that their structures, their lot coverage, and stuff like that. And honestly, personal opinion, I believe they should stay the same because it's only in the residential lake district that it affects it. We need to keep that vegetated buffer between the lake and development. There's other options between pervious pavements. If you go pervious pavements or pavers, there's a maintenance issue where you have to vacuum them, clean them. There's pitting, there's sinking, there's filling in, sediment loads. It's very difficult to maintain them, and there's no enforcement of maintaining them on private property. So 1 year they install it, everything's good and everything. Come back a year later, it's full of salt, grit, and everything. And I'm not going to start enforcing permeate pavers on people's private property to bring them to court and everything like that because they didn't vacuum their front yard and keep it clean. Best thing would be to keep it green. I can show you other options. Like here is options such as grass in between pavers, which doesn't require vacuuming and stuff. We'd only count the stones themselves as part of lot coverage. There's other options like this, which is green. You'd only count the pavers themselves as lot coverage, not the green in between. So you could probably take 50% off your calculations. There's these for driveways. We have a few of these in town where there's pea stone and then this is grass, and the easy calculations as far as what the lot coverage is, as far as 50% vegetated, 50% solid. Here's a grass driveway that just has a 4-inch stone base and stuff that's easily maintainable. There's a lot of options besides a high maintenance permeable pavement. I mean, we can name Ontario Honda, we could do GMC. Both of them have pervious pavement. Neither of them have cleaned it, and GMC has, I believe, seal coated most of their pervious pavement asphalt up there. So that's my personal opinion. I can go into what it takes to maintain pervious pavement. I mean, you need a vacuum truck like this.
That's not true.
I mean, to clean, okay, well.
You're
it takes
emphasizing your point, Chris. That's not absolute. That's not true.
To maintain pervious pavement, you have to make sure you vacuum and clean it out.
You do not. You don't have to have a vacuum truck to maintain permeable pavers.
How do you do it, John?
You just, in some instances, you can sweep it clean. Other instances, you can wash it clean. The only thing that you need to worry about with the permeable pavers is the joints filling up with mold. And you don't need a vacuum, or dirt. And you don't need a vacuum truck to do that. I understand Chris's point. He doesn't like the idea of permeable pavers, so he's presenting a very one-sided conversation about it. But that's not an accurate representation of what permeable pavers are. And you also said that it's mostly in the residential lakefront district. And most of the people in the residential lakefront district are very responsible stewards of the lake and the properties. Now, if you're comparing that to an automobile dealership on 332, I don't think that's an accurate comparison or a good analogy.
So how do you keep people from sealing those pavers that you want to see all over the residential lake district.
Well, I don't say I want to see them all over the residential lake district.
Well, it sounds that way.
We had a great example that came forward last night that was presented to the zoning board for pavers that weren't even necessary. So my point is that I believe we as a community should be encouraging the use of permeable systems as opposed to impermeable systems. So as an example, when a person comes before the community or the town, we want to encourage them to use permeable pavers for a driveway, permeable pavers for a sidewalk. The way things are now, there's no incentive for people to provide those permeable systems.
How do you get people to maintain them?
Well, we're talking about residential lakefront district people. Most of those people in general are going to go and maintain their properties. But I don't think we could legislate based on whether people are going to maintain or abide by the rules and regulations to begin with. Yes,
Why should we allow it? If you don't think you can control it, why should we allow it?
Because I think we want to encourage the permeability of the lots, not discourage the permeability of the lots. And that's what we're doing now. We're discouraging the use of permeable pavers because there is no benefit to the person to use them.
Can I chime in here? Again, John, I agree that we should encourage permeable pavers, but the whole issue arises because we have folks that buy teeny lots in the RLD and want to totally envelop the lot with structures or whatever. And it's strictly an accommodation for folks who have bought too small a lot for their aspirations. And, you know, I hate to get into class warfare here, but that's the only reason we look at permeable pavers is because somebody wants to overwhelm the lot with their structure or their driveways or their swimming pool or their tennis court or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think that's the only reason we look at permeable pavers, Tom. And my point is that I think we should be encouraging permeable pavers if we're looking out for the benefit of the lake. Because right now people are using impermeable surfaces such as asphalt driveways, concrete sidewalks, and they're using those instead.
I agree with you there, but the reason it's arisen is because we're accommodating lot coverage.
Well, I'll tell you as a zoning board member, and over the last 5 or 6 meetings, I have received written recommendations from the Environmental Conservation Board suggesting that the owner use permeable pavers as a way to minimize the impact. And the zoning board has interpreted that recommendation as a way for us to go and approve the zoning request, the variance request. And I would be willing to say, and I haven't done a study on this, I've only gone and copied the recommendations that the Environmental Conservation Board has presented. And I would be willing to say that in most instances, if not all, we have approved the variance request by the owner using a permeable system. So I gotta believe if someone truly wanted to challenge this, we've set a precedent besides.
We wouldn't need a variance request, but for the fact is they're overwhelming the lot coverage.
Yes.
And again, true. I agree that we all should encourage this permeable pavers, but the only reason it arises is because somebody wants to overwhelm the lot with structure coverage or building coverage.
Well,
John?
I need to say something from being on the ZBA also. If it's a little late in the game to challenge development in the pre-existing nonconformities, where the barn door has been open and it's late in the game for that. Trying to do the best we can with a difficult situation. If these people, and they can afford it, will go with this system, we find that to be preferable than the old style. I would go for this all over Canandaigua, except that it's a little more expensive. And the people that are have these plans in the RLD can afford it. Now, whether or not it's guaranteed that it will help the lake and make it a better world, there is no guarantee. But the plan itself, as presented to us, makes us as stewards of the lake happy, because there is less runoff into the lake than there would have been with the previous models.
And let me just emphasize,
hey, John,
yeah,
we are going to get this resolved today. We're going to listen to what people have to offer, and then we're going to bring it up when we have the ordinance committee meeting, probably the 5th of April, when we have our normal meeting. Okay. I'd like to hear the input from other individuals, especially the Kevin and also the ECB boards. And so if you'll just hold back on your comments until we get to our meeting on the 5th, I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Because I don't want to take up the whole meeting with an argument here, if we could. You have any more things to say, Chris?
Honestly, I'd like to hear from Mr. Mulvaney. Okay,
that's the next one on the.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody. I'm doing a lot of listening right now, and I want to go and look further at the proposal and get a better understanding of it. I will say Chris has a huge point in terms of the maintenance component of pervious pavers or pervious pavement is a critical feature that has to be thought about and figured out. DEC does have, with their stormwater manual, there are certain requirements, standards that have to be met. And that's typically, it's a good standard to kind of go with. It's a good way to kind of write your code to reflect the DEC stormwater manual that looks at these type of alternative practices. And yes, I do think pervious pavers should be in the toolbox. However, I think, the town, it was a couple years ago, we need to remember that, especially for these smaller lots, there was a change to the lot coverage to better reflect the pre-existing issues. Instead of granting variances carte blanche, try to better reflect the lot coverage for those smaller lots, up to 40% roughly in terms of allowances for lot coverage. So that was done to try to reduce the variances. And what I would be concerned about is seeing pervious pavers be put in to try to, maybe some sort of bonus, something like that would allow a greater amount of lot coverage, if you will, with pervious pavers on these smaller lots, because you guys made those adjustments to try to better reflect the reality of these small existing lots that are out there. South Bristol, I got to go back and look at their percentages, but I think they have a much stricter lot coverage requirement. I think they're in the 25% range. I'm going to go back and verify that for lot coverage, but what they allow is a bonus. Basically, they will say, all right, if it's 1,000 square feet of pervious pavers going in, they will only count that as 500 square feet of lot coverage. So they kind of give a 50% benefit from that perspective. But what I would worry about is it's sort of opening up Pandora's box again of more structure, if you will, more coverage of some sort of paver on that landscape. So I think you got to figure out what's going to make the most sense for especially those smaller lots from that perspective. So, pervious pavers, when they function and when they're maintained, yeah, they do a very good job of infiltrating and looking at it that way. It's just they do have to be maintained. That is sort of the weak point on those systems. If they fill in over time with sediment, their infiltration rate dramatically reduces. So, Gary, thanks for the opportunity to talk through this, and I definitely will be willing to work further with you guys on it.
Thanks, Kevin. Jared, are you going to address the concerns, or each of your individual?
Well, I will. I did get an email from Sarah Linda supporting it, depending on the level of water infiltration that they do allow. Before I speak, I would like to let anybody else who has been on the committee, and I know this has been discussed, I am new to this, so I will defer to those who have been on it longer, and then when they're done, I will share my thoughts. So okay. Is there anybody from the ECB who would like to speak up? Looks like Edith does.
Yes. Possibly the language needs to say infiltrative surfaces instead of pervious pavers, not specifying, since there are other models. As far as the maintenance problems, true. However, you know, you do not cease posting speed limit signs because some people don't obey them. You have to assume goodwill from people who are willing to put them in. And I think you would find that by and large, particularly from private homeowners. I think that the maintenance would not be anything that, actually many of the homeowners themselves would deal with. I think they'd probably hire it out. You know, they have lawn services, and I don't anticipate huge problems of relatively wealthy people taking care of these things.
Wealthy.
Thanks, Edith.
Thanks, Edith. Anybody else have anything? Okay, hearing that silence, I'll take that as a no.
I mean, it's Chris again. All I can say is, historically, as far as maintaining these pervious systems, it's been difficult to enforce it, and it's hard to do anything. And it's not like I can enforce it on private property. So, I mean, the commercial businesses, yes, but I doubt the town board wants to spend money on lawyers and stuff to go after places like GMC or Honda and stuff because they paved or sealed up their stuff. And I know it's different between commercial and the RLD. I'm just saying they're historically someone with money and the means to maintain it and stuff like that, and they're not being maintained. Ponds are visible, infiltration structures are visible, pavement, you forget about it, it's there, it's gone.
Now, a couple thoughts I have on this. Now, Chris, do you know offhand, because you had shown some other options there, do you know offhand the cost comparison, talking with people, you know, doing inspections and things between a permeable surface and, for example, the cobblestones with the grass in between?
I mean, the grass in between is just vegetation. I mean, yeah, I think Mr. Casey said it's sometimes hard because you get moss and clumped up stuff that doesn't permeate or infiltrate as well. But the ones with the open spaces that have grass in them, you can tell whether or not they're clogged or not because there's grass or not there. Again, and then we wouldn't even need to do anything as far as saying it's pervious or impervious or permeable, because 50% of it's stone, 50% of it's grass. So you just take away 50% of it is for lot coverage.
Are there any places that have the permeable asphalt around here? I know Syracuse has many installations of that.
We have several sites, commercial sites that have it, that, again, truthfully, in my inspections, they've paved over it. They don't like the gritty feel of it. So it's going to be an issue in the future where I have to cite them and stuff for not maintaining it.
And I kind of agree, you know, with Terry and what he was saying, the concern of enforcement. We don't want to create something and create a situation of something that's unenforceable. And the fear is, again, we know that homeowners, when they build, they maintain, they have ownership in that. And then when they sell, there's no guarantee that down the road that transaction is going to continue. And it's a hard, you know, we've now created more lot coverage. And if that gets paved over and that gets changed, there's no recourse really, you know, and we're really hamstrung. I do like changing it, if we do, to have some sort of infiltrative surface to allow other options and not just really pigeonhole it to the permeable pavers. I like the, you know, some sort of surface that will allow infiltration. I don't know where I am yet on, you know, how much should we allow based on the amount of infiltrative surface on the lot.
Well, right now the planning board is making the decisions on that or the zoning. So you are suggesting in the future them not being involved with it, which probably would not work very well due to the fact that they have an idea of what the site plan is and everything else.
Was that for, what was your question? Was that for me, Gary?
Well, it was just general, I guess. If you wanted to answer it,
as far as the ECB, I think we should still be involved with that and have that discussion, because we see it, you know, you know, a lot of great ideas coming out of members of this group and see it from a different light. So I would not suggest not being part of that. No.
Nor would I.
I'm gonna go back to what kind of Kevin said. So our lot coverage for a lot under 10,000 square feet is 40%, 10,000 to 20,000 is 30%, and then more than 20,000 is 25%. We set those several years ago, again, to make it and give them more. It used to be only 25 pretty much across the board. So they increased that. If we wanted to allow for pavement, pervious, whatever, infiltrative surfaces, Edith, then we could drop them all and then say you have another 5% if you use a surface such as that. I mean, that's the thing. If you could do reductions of lot coverage, change the charts, and then say promote use of these things, but still not go over the 40, 30, and 25%.
And that would give them an incentive to get to their 40% through the use of those surfaces. Whereas now they can hit that 40% and then they can ask for more based on the use of those surfaces, which isn't always a guarantee. So that they get maintained. So
one of the questions then becomes, just thinking out loud, since we did make those changes a few years ago, we gave more lot coverage. Would people, if we do something like this, still be coming in asking for even more? I mean, it seems like you're always chasing your tail here, that no matter what you give, people want more.
I think I just need to jump in here, Gary, excuse me, but
right.
I think it's appropriate based on where the conversation is going. So Chris, I kind of like your idea. If we kind of can take a look at the driveways and the non-livable spaces and kind of make some accommodations to motivate people to use permeable pavers in those instances. I like that. Last night, we had a case come before us at the zoning board where they were asking for a minimal amount of variance based on lot coverage. They were going for 27% when 25% is required. Now, what didn't help them, but I thought was a great position that the owner was presenting, they had their entire driveway, which was a large driveway. It actually wrapped around the back of the house. And they used permeable pavers on the whole driveway. And it couldn't be help them relative to the lot coverage because of where we're at. But they came with the idea, I believe, and they didn't say this, but it was my assumption, that they came with the idea of showing the zoning board that they were environmentally conscious and good stewards of the lake and good stewards of the property by using permeable pavers for this whole thing, and couldn't use it to offset that 2% that they were asking for. And I think that's the point I'm trying to get across. If we can provide some motivation for individual homeowners to use these permeable surfaces rather than the impermeable surfaces, it's a benefit to the community. It's a benefit to the lake. It's a benefit to everyone. And the challenge I see is for us to come up with motivational language that would encourage people to use these systems.
I agree. I think we should encourage the use. The only hang up I have is the maintenance. You know, this houses sell and somebody maybe not even aware that the surface has to be maintained. How do you, if you're going to be a good steward of the lake, you have to be a good steward of the lake all the time in perpetuity. So how do you make sure that those things are clean? And going on somebody's property and with a microscope and looking to see if every pore is still there, it's just not right, not feasible.
The connecting link is the realtor. And there is a program that the Soil and Water Conservation District has that is a water workshop, and it talks about these kinds of structures, as well as other kinds of water quality issues, everything from septic tanks to stormwater runoff. And this would be a good place for the town to have some information for the realtors. They are the links between the owners for the realtors, and they can transmit that information. You know, here you have a real benefit, pervious pavers or infiltrative surfaces or whatever. It takes this kind of maintenance. Those are the people that would transmit the information.
If they would.
It's not going to be a selling point for a piece of parcel that you have to maintain stuff.
But, it's not a selling point for any maintenance, you know, take a look at bathrooms, but it is supposed to be disclosed when the property passes. Those sorts of things are required to be disclosed, just like the electricity and everything else about a home. So there's where it could go.
Again, this only becomes an issue because they go to zoning because we're accommodating homeowners or lot owners who have lots that are too small to accommodate their aspirations. And as Kevin pointed out, 2 or 3 or 5 years ago, we changed we have 3 different levels of lot sizes in the RLD, and they still work around it. And everybody agrees that we should have as much infiltrative surfaces or permeable surfaces, but it still boils down to they go for variances because they've got a lot that they bought is too small to accommodate their big home. And
I agree, Tom. You're completely right. And guess what? Even if you make these changes, they're still going to come in and ask for more.
They're going to come in for a variance and say, we're doing this or that, or we're adding solar, so we ought to get blessed with our fancy new home. I'm sorry, we've got a lot of small lots, and you don't buy a small lot if you want to build a mega mansion.
Yeah.
So Chris, can you go over your thought again? What are our percentages, or maybe Gary, you can help me out. What are our percentages of coverage?
They're like 40, 35, 25 right now. But the thing is, if you're going to do this infiltrative surfaces, you should drop the 40 to 30 and allow them to go to 40, which would just be the same as what we're doing now, but it would promote the use of it. So it doesn't help the owner. It helps the town promote green infrastructure.
Right. And then instead of asking from now going from 40 to say 50, now they're doing what they need to do to go from 30 to 40. And that would be lowering the, they're still going to ask, but at least we have the system in place to say, well, you're allowed this much, but you can go up to this amount with that pervious surface. Whereas before they might start at 40 and say, well, we know they'd like to go to a higher percentage or whatever because they want to add those surfaces. So
I will guarantee they will still come in for a variance.
They will.
Well, it's always been that way that they come in. When I was on the zoning for the number of years I was, and Tom, you were in planning for a lot of years, and Terry, and all of our ordinance committee have either served on the planning at the present time or the zoning have, but they always come before the zoning. Most of these individuals through their spokesperson and ask for something that you knew darn well that they weren't going to get, and the zoning board was not going to allow it, but they ended up basically in what they probably were looking at to begin with. So and the zoning and planning board have to, take a stance on things and really determine what the final outcome would be.
If you have a position on the ZBA, you've got job security.
Yeah, I mean, we could say, well, we could change it to 90 and they'd want 95.
Right.
It's the way it's going to be. Gary says I can have 5 chickens, but I want 6. So I mean, it's that whole, it's that whole situation. I mean, it's everybody's. What's that?
Now you have a dozen.
No, I'm not answering. I cannot confirm or deny that statement. But anyway,
No roasters.
I'm agriculture. So I agree fully. Everybody, that's human nature. Everybody's going to want to take that step more. But if we lower the bar originally and put it back in line, maybe people, people will still want to make that step, but that step won't be quite as big. And that's my thought on it.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
It is. Are there any more individuals that'd like to have some input? Because today's an informational meeting as far as I was concerned between the two boards, yeah. And to see what the thought process was from the ECB, and also to touch on it through the ordinance as we move forward with them.
So Gary, this is Leaf.
Yeah.
I just have one question because I am new to all of this. Is there been much information about mixing and matching surfaces? In other words, a certain number of square feet of non-permeable asphalt bordered by permeable materials?
That'd probably be something that Chris would be more knowledgeable of than I.
Well, we've seen where they have like asphalt surrounded by pea gravel with an infiltration trench and stuff to pretty much like a green infrastructure, something like that. So yes, we have a lot of sediment basins and stuff that work very well. A lot of new homeowners are taking their roof downspouts to these rain gardens and stuff like that. And it's been working very well, and they do maintain them because they are a aesthetic flowering grass kind of area that they like the looks of on their property.
I mean, to me, that just seems to be, I mean, I like the idea of it would be great if everybody would do permeable surfaces. Like Tom was saying, if you can afford the lot and you can afford the house, why can't you afford the permeable surfaces? But I know that, regardless of how deep somebody's pockets are, everybody's always looking to save money. If it just seems logical that if we could encourage people to at least border, those permeable surfaces, so that there was some control. Now, I imagine those systems, Chris, probably get overwhelmed when we have one of our massive frog strangling, deluges. If you've got a border that's only a few feet wide at the end of, a couple thousand square feet of asphalt, it's probably not going to manage all of that water. But it would seem under
most of them are 25 years or whatever, 25-year storms and stuff. Yeah. They take our usual things. It's just those 1 or 2 a year. Yeah, they're overwhelmed, but they take care of the majority of it.
Yeah, and that would seem to me to be a I don't know, Solomon's kind of thing. But again, I'm the new guy, so I like everything I'm hearing. I mean, I think it's the first concern we have to be is quality of that watershed.
We all agree to that. Are there any other questions that people or observations
I
like to bring forward?
Just one more on it. I still think we should maintain the setback requirements and consider them structures, just because we do want that green in between the lake and pavement.
Yes, I certainly agree with that. If you look at what has happened with water quality and the cyanobacteria, etc., over the past few years, we are not in good shape, I would say. And anything we can do to prevent more runoff from entering the lake untreated, uninfiltrated through the ground, then the better off we are. Everything's tied to the lake in this area, the property values, the tax revenues, etc. So the more protection we can give it, the better.
I would say that Chris made a good point, that we shouldn't look at increasing the numbers in terms of the rules to play by, but by incentivizing, we could actually drop the numbers and then come up to that threshold. I thought that was a good idea. I like the incentive idea.
Maybe that was Kevin's idea, actually, because South Bristol does it.
I think that's great. The other thing is Tom had mentioned, about the pre-existing nonconformities. If you get a chance to look at the Google satellite shots, there are huge houses all over the place on small lots. He's absolutely right. And then one of the things that we do on the ZBA is look at the character of the neighborhood and what's going on and in that neighborhood. And that makes it a little dicey at times. Whether we've made good decisions or bad ones in the past, we have to live with them, and they become part of the framework of what we do, you know, in the current. With the ZBA, it seems like most of the variances are based on either hardship or people wanting to make their dreams come true. And in the RLD, it's more about the dreams than other parts of the town. It's more about hardships.
Does anyone else have any comments before we move on to the next item on the agenda? We certainly will take, you know, all of the information that we received today and bring it up at our meeting as we move forward, the next meeting as we move forward as an ordinance committee to get this project or this item taken care of, hopefully. No other comments from anybody?
I do, Gary. I've got one more.
Okay.
Would it be appropriate to have Chris try to draft some preliminary language to try to consider when we get together as an ordinance committee? Or do you think we're not there yet?
I don't think we're there yet.
No, I don't think we are either.
No.
Okay.
I'm gonna talk to Mr. Albany and see if he can get me some info on what South Bristol does as far as the give and take, and maybe we have something from them that we can just kind of peek at.
Maybe you could at that April 5th meeting, you know, have some information.
I can definitely work with you, Chris, on that.
Thanks.
This is Kevin Olvani. I can definitely work with you on that, Chris, and we can kind of throw some concepts out there for the committee to look at.
I didn't realize you were still on, Kevin. I appreciate you being on. And now
I've been in and out. I got an excavator changing a culvert out, so I'm making sure that's going well, then popping into the truck to listen in. So I apologize.
No, that's no problem at all. The next topic on the agenda is billboards. And you indicated, Jared, that your committee was interested in what was happening with the billboards.
You had told me that was on the agenda, so I said sure.
Take it off the agenda, Gary.
Yeah, you try to get rid of me to
kind of say what's on the code right now. And I think this is being brought up because
Chris, could I interrupt for a moment to make the people that aren't aware on the billboards that what it pertains to is, I'm sure everybody on the Zoom call knows, there's one billboard on 332 up by the where the driving range is on 332. There's one on 21 coming into town, and then there's two over by Big Lots. And what is being, you know, what we're going to be doing is to have the company remove all four of them and replace the one on 332 and the one at Big Lots with a digital sign. So I just wanted to let the people that aren't aware of that know what the it was in regard to the billboards. Okay, Chris, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, it's your meeting. I interrupted. So the question is so we got town code, which doesn't allow flashing, no changing signs, no intensity of lighting shall not exceed necessary. And then there's no changeable copy except for that on a gas station to change the costs of the gas and stuff. The question is it a modification of code we're looking for, or simply they can apply for a variance and we can speak to the variance board about what the intent is as far as taking 4, turning it into 2, but not opening the door for future LED display TV screens and stuff. That's the question. I don't know the process of getting those approved, but not opening up Pandora's box as far as flashing TV ad, giant LED billboards.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I thought that at one point that all the billboards had to be phased out. Has that been nixed by statute or legislation or whatever?
We had a resident on Weifels Road, and she kept all the information from 10 years ago about the things that in 10 years their value would disappear, and that according to our code, they'd have to be removed. We took that to actual federal court and stuff because she's filed complaints, and we did our due diligence, and they upheld Admar's complaint that they're commercial, they're pre-existing, you can't have them torn down and stuff. So we put a nail in that, and that's kind of behind us now.
Okay, thank you.
But that was also, Lamar came to us though and threatened to sue us if we didn't allow this. There's a lot more to the story.
Okay, so
because we accept federal money, you know, for highways, there is a loophole in the whole thing where we said they had to be phased out in 10 years, but the feds say something else. So I mean, it's now we're faced with this suit potentially.
Thanks for the clarification. So now the issue is whether we're going to have changeable copy signs that are in the signs are the pre-existing signs are still allowed. Is that the summary?
No, can I pop in for a sec? So there was the town sought to enforce the law. The amortization scale was found to be unconstitutional, or lack of amortization. So the law was written, basically your 10 years of having it would amount to amortization, which would be sufficient to pay for those billboards. But there have been other cases, there are lower court cases which say that's not sufficient to reimburse the owner for the value of the property. And Terry is right. Part of that loophole had to do with if you accept federal funding for your roads, and this is on one such road, which 5 and 20 and 332 would be, you cannot resort to that. Now there are some loopholes in that, but it's not a definite. So there's a lawsuit currently pending on this. And in order to try to resolve it, all of these signs, which we attempted to take down by that law, which the 10 years had expired, and they should be taken down, Admar said, no, you're wrong on the law. And we were sued. So as a settlement, this is what's being proposed. So not to change code, not to make it for everyone, but to just settle this particular lawsuit. Okay.
Thanks.
Yep.
Well, we still would probably have to find a route in order to approve them, right?
That's my understanding, right? So whatever settlement could be reached, the settlement agreement, I would assume, would have to come before everyone for approval.
Who is everyone?
That's a good question. That's a question for our town attorney, which I am not, as you all know, who I want to be. But I guess we're looking for, my understanding, again, this is, and maybe Chris Nadler, I mean, he's the attorney, so he would be the one to maybe have here on this, is we're just looking for general thoughts on this type of a billboard. So as my fellow board members will tell you, we had a presentation from Admar with the type of billboards, and maybe we need those graphics just to see what people think. Is everyone completely opposed to it? In no way. We keep going through. I think one option is to just not enforce the law. We could just let it go and they could stay status quo. Now, people still could not put up new billboards because we're not worried about that portion of the law, which talks about amortization. So those are sort of all the options as I understand it.
But to follow the standard process, I would respectfully request they make application to the planning board and a variance to the zoning board. We throw it through the whole process, and maybe the determination of the zoning board is the reduction of 4 signs to 2 signs is less than the degree of conformance, and that's what they base the determination on or something like that. But just to follow the standard process so we don't have to ignore laws and the complaints and stuff.
That sounds good.
Yeah, we certainly don't want to open the door to having changeable copy signs all over every shopping district and all that.
Are there any other thoughts anybody has in regard to billboards?
I just wonder if we waive or overlook one provision of the statute, whether we're opening the door for more signs. And I guess Kathy or Chris will have to decide on that.
I mean, that's a question, but generally when parts of a law are unenforceable, it doesn't render the whole law unenforceable under these circumstances. And since we're not talking about new billboards, we could just omit that section, write a new that just says no billboards. But the problem was the amortization schedule, not you could have a law which says you can't have the billboards, but the reimbursement portion was the issue. But I think it's still severable. It probably says it somewhere, severable.
Yeah.
That portion can be taken out.
Yeah, there's a section in our code that says if any part of this code is found unconstitutional, everything like that. My question is just, in order to move things along, could they make application for these 2 new billboards, proposing removal of the 4 billboards, zoning says findings of this, and then we just kind of move forward with it and call it a day?
Sounds like a good solution.
Run it by Nadler, see what he says.
Any other input on the billboards? Not,
Chuck,
we will.
Chuck, what do you think? That seemed like the right process, Chuck?
Yeah, I think once they agree to the settlement on the lawsuit, then it would go through the legislative or our procedure as far as zoning board and planning board, just like any other sign.
That would seem nice, easy solution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'll check that out and let the committee know, what I find out in regards to that.
I think that the settlement can't be reached until we agree to do it. That's, again, not being the lawyer in this, so it's a...
No, that's what I'm saying. It would just be nice if they could make application and boom, it's settled kind of thing.
Right. So, so one of us will speak to Chris on that.
Yeah.
Gary.
Gary, it's on you.
You trying to get my attention, Kathy?
You brought it up, Gary.
Chris on.
Just say yes.
Yeah, I brought it up for you people to help solve it. Is there anything else that anybody wants to discuss before we adjourn the meeting? If not, I'd like to thank the ECB for attending and giving us their thoughts on, different items, or the 2 items, and also thanks to everybody else from the public attending. And if you have any thoughts from that didn't speak up today, feel free to send an email or contact Town Hall in regard to either one of these, so that we can look at it in the Ordinance Committee when we meet. We'll be meeting on April 5th at 9 o'clock. And so it'll be the pavers and the billboards, and there may be another item or 2 that we'll add to it if it looks like that we can fit it in under the agenda or under the time limit.
Yeah, so, Gary, if we can get something for the Ordinance Committee to chew on at that meeting in terms of something in writing regarding the permeable pavements, that would be very helpful.
Okay, very good. And I'll also see if we can get some kind of a thought process from the town attorney to present to the committee at that time, if it will be helpful. So, can I get a motion
before Gary?
Oh, sorry.
Gary, before you close the meeting, I just had a message for John Casey, and that is to remember to keep the Saints' Day holy, John.
I do that every day, Terry.
Well, thanks very much. I'd like to, have a motion. We adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you. And thanks everybody for coming. And we'll see you on April 5th at 9 o'clock for our regular meeting for April.
See you, everybody. Thanks for having us.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.
Schlaka.
So long.